Let's talk about Nemesis, the towering trench-coated monstrosity that made us all fear the sound of stars echoing through the ruined streets of Raccoon City. If you first encountered him in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, or were introduced to his hideous persistence in the remake, one thing is clear. This bioengineered mutant is the pinnacle of bioweapon evolution, and a fan favorite. The question is, what do we really know about him? What really makes him tick? What lurks beneath that stitched-together skin and creepy, expressionless face? In this deep dive, we'll dissect the Nemesis T-Type, from its parasitic intelligence and enhanced muscle structure to its self-repairing cellular makeup and infamous weaponry. If you're a fan of survival horror, or just fascinated by bioengineered horrors, this breakdown will leave you with a newfound respect, and maybe a little fear, for Umbrella's most infamous creation. As usual, before we get started, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Well now, let's begin, shall we? When was Nemesis created, and what was its mission? Let me paint you a situation. You're trying to survive a zombie apocalypse, and you're dodging the undead, scrounging for supplies, trying to keep your sanity intact, when suddenly an 8-foot-tall, 600-pound horror stomps into view. Oh, and it really wants you dead. Congratulations! You've just met Nemesis T-Type, Umbrella Corporation's most terrifying creation. Also known as the Pursuer, this hulking abomination is the main antagonist of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis and its remake, and for good reason too. Unlike the average tyrant, Nemesis is smarter, deadlier, and actually following orders. What's scarier than a relentless killing machine? A relentless killing machine that knows what it's doing. Now, Nemesis wasn't a science experiment gone wrong. Rather, he was Umbrella's dream BOW developed in the Paris labs of Umbrella's European branch. Nemesis was part of an attempt to solve a long-standing problem with their previous creations. They were dumb as bricks. The classic tyrants were powerful, sure, but not exactly tacticians. The answer to this was the Alpha parasite, a small creature that hijacks a host's brain, granting them higher intelligence while simultaneously mutating them into an absolute monster. The Nemesis project stalled for years, as most hosts didn't survive the process. Meanwhile, in the US, Umbrella's American branch was working on its own version of a smarter tyrant, the TALOS, a cyborg that was all about tech integration and controlled by the Red Queen. Eventually, the European team struck gold with a host that survived the parasite fusion, resulting in the terrifying beast we all know and fear, Nemesis TO2. The first and only active Nemesis TO2 was given a single brutal mission: hunt down and eliminate the surviving members of STARS. Oh boy, and did he take that personally. This catastrophe of a tyrant tore through Raccoon City with only that goal in mind. Honestly, if there were ever a zombie apocalypse MVP, it'd be this guy. How did Nemesis hunt and mutate during the Raccoon City outbreak? Jill and the rest of STARS had been a pain in Umbrella's corporate backside ever since the Arkley Mansion incident. What better way to clean up loose ends than to send in a bioengineered Terminator with a personal hit list? They even showed Nemesis photos of his targets. The first stop on Nemesis's murder tour was Brad Vickers. The poor guy barely stood a chance, as Nemesis's tentacle impaled him right through the skull in front of the Raccoon City Police Department. Jill witnessed this, so of course, his next target was her. From that moment on, Nemesis became the worst kind of stalker, ambushing Jill at every turn. It barely mattered if she was running through the city, escaping on a train, or trying to get a rescue chopper. He was always right there, usually with a rocket launcher or some brand new mutation. Never mind how many times she thought she'd escaped, he kept coming back. Jill's biggest showdown with Nemesis happened at St. Michael's Clock Tower, where he shot down her rescue chopper instead of letting her escape. Just when you thought things couldn't get any worse, he stabbed her with a tentacle and infected her with the T-virus. Jill wasn't going down that easy though. With a mix of firepower, explosions, and sheer willpower, she managed to blast Nemesis into a burning, tentacle-covered mess. Unfortunately, that was just his cue to mutate even further, as getting uglier and more dangerous at this point came to him like second nature. After Carlos Oliveira saved Jill with a vaccine, Nemesis Nemesis made yet another dramatic entrance, smashing through a brick wall like a demonic Kool-Aid man. Jill managed to shake him off in Raccoon Park, only to face him again at Umbrella's secret dead factory. This time, she was able to douse him in a pool of industrial waste, melting away most of his body. Although even that wasn't enough to finish him. Instead, he absorbed a dead T-103 tyrant and mutated into a massive, tentacled nightmare. By the time Jill reached the facility's power plant, Nemesis was barely even recognizable as a humanoid anymore. In the remake, the depiction is slightly different. Nemesis's final form was a deformed, slug-like abomination with giant tendrils anchoring him to the ground. Instead of absorbing a T-103 tyrant, he consumed a few many random corpses. At this point, Jill had dealt with enough, so she did what any reasonable person would do: shoved a giant railgun into his mouth and pulled the trigger. If that doesn't stop him, I don't know what will. What defines Nemesis's personality and physical traits? Nemesis isn't here to make friends, he's here to hunt and destroy. Like other tyrants, he has no emotions, no personal vendettas, and definitely no life outside of relentless murder. His vocabulary is limited to one word: stars. It's not much, but when you're an 8-foot-tall bioweapon designed for pure destruction, you don't need small talk. Unlike most mindless bioweapons, Nemesis is actually smarter than your average tyrant. He strategizes, adapts, and never gives up. If you think you've outrun him, think again, because Nemesis is as persistent as they come. The only real way to stop him is total annihilation, for anything less will simply bring him back to life again. Nemesis's durability isn't just because of his sheer size, it's thanks to the Nemesis alpha parasite, which secretes chemicals that have permanently stained his skin a sickly brown, making him look like he bathed in rust. These same secretions also supercharges his regenerative abilities, meaning that every time he takes damage, he comes back even worse. Unlike other tyrants that rely on a power limiter to keep their mutations in check, Nemesis is controlled by his heavy-duty trench coat. Now, this coat is more than just a fashion statement. It's ballistic armor designed to withstand bullets and explosions. Once that coat is gone, all bets are off. The more damage Nemesis takes, the more gnarled and powerful he becomes, mutating into something even more terrifying. Honestly, if you see Nemesis, just run for your life. How powerful is Nemesis in combat and strategy? Unlike other tyrants, Nemesis was fused with the Any alpha parasite from birth, making him smarter, deadlier, and surprisingly good at using weapons. If you're thinking taking him down is an option, bad news. He mutates, adapts, and keeps coming back stronger. Now let's get to his abilities and powers that make him a true horror, shall we? To start with, Nemesis is strong. To be more specific, he has punched through brick walls and has yanked helicopters out of the sky. Yeah, okay, so he's super strong. He can lift and throw humans like ragdolls, carry oversized weaponry no person could ever lift, and even obliterate other tyrants in battle. He's taken down 4 T-103 models, defeated a super tyrant, and ripped William Birkin's 4th form to pieces. If that wasn't bad enough, his jaw is strong enough to bite off a human head like it's an apple. I doubt anybody can survive that. His body is packed with deadly tentacles that can stab, grab, and even infect enemies with the Any alpha parasite. These tentacles aren't just for show either. Well, I mean, of course they aren't, but they can actually help pull enemies toward him, knock weapons out of the air, and even serve as a grappling hook so he can chase his prey across buildings. Essentially, he's a slasher villain with Spider-Man's mobility. In the Resident Evil 3 remake, Nemesis has a roar so powerful it can stun his enemies and leave them open for attack. Imagine getting jump scared so hard you literally freeze in place. Not fun. Nemesis can shrug off direct hits from rocket launchers, walk through flames like he's on a runway, and take high-caliber rounds to the face without slowing down. He even survived a massive explosion from Mikhail Victor's suicide attack and a train crash right after, so he's practically also explosion-proof. Now, if you do manage to hurt him, I'm afraid to tell you that you've only made things worse. His T-virus enhanced metabolism and Any alpha parasite secretions boost his healing, making him one of the fastest regenerators in the Tyrant lineup. He's not quite at G-virus mutation levels, but he's close enough to make you regret ever looking at him. Damage Nemesis too much, and he'll mutate on the spot. His trench coat is the only thing keeping his transformations in check. Once it's gone, he grows massive tentacles, acid-spewing glands, and new limbs specifically designed to counter whatever weapon you were just using against him. Most tyrants are slow, but Nemesis? Oh, he's got speed. He can outrun any human, charge like a raging bull, and even scale walls and buildings when he really wants to make your day worse. In the RE3 remake, his second form climbs walls on all fours like a giant mutated panther, but uglier. If you somehow manage to survive all that, Nemesis evolves again. After taking acid damage in the original game, he gains the ability to spit acid himself, because apparently he wasn't terrifying enough. In the remake, his final form secretes corrosive bile that gets even worse as the difficulty increases. How does Nemesis fight in its first form in the remake? In the first form of Nemesis, he's terrifyingly fast. It's practically impossible to outrun him. This mutant can close the gap in seconds, either by taking a few massive strides or just leaping straight over your head like some kind of nightmare Olympic athlete. Oh, and don't even consider shooting him from a safe distance, for he can dodge bullets and explosives like he's been training in the Matrix. The guy even uses his tentacles to snatch grenades out of the air. He has strength that breaks everything, including your will to live. He can punch through concrete walls, rip open massive metal containers, and even destroy half a subway station in a matter of seconds. If he wants to get through something, he's getting through it. If that something happens to be you, well, good luck. His coat in its first form is actually a bulletproof, explosion-resistant material that covers his entire body. Rockets, grenades, heavy artillery, all useless. As I mentioned before, it's actually a restraining system designed to keep the NE alpha parasite from going completely rogue. Holding everything together is a metal chest plate shaped like a heart, because even bioengineered killing machines need a little symbolism. And like we said, he's got tentacles. Lots and lots of them. He can whip, pierce, and grab enemies from a distance like some kind of horrifying cephalopod ninja. In his first form, he can swing around the city using them, which explains how this giant tyrant can disappear and reappear in an instant. He can also create super zombies by infecting regular ones with his own parasite. As if tentacle attacks and super strength weren't enough, Nemesis also wields heavy weapons with terrifying efficiency. He'll chase you down with a flamethrower when he's feeling spicy, and when that's not enough, he'll pull out a rocket launcher just to make sure you're having the worst day of your life. How does Nemesis change in its second form in the remake? One would hope that after being blown up by rockets, set on fire, caught in gas station explosions, and smashed by a freaking train, Nemesis would finally give up. But nope. Instead of staying down like any reasonable beast, he evolves into something even worse. With all that destruction ripping his coat apart, his regulation device breaking, and the NE alpha parasite going completely haywire, Nemesis mutates so drastically that he can't even keep a humanoid shape anymore. The result is a giant, rampaging Frankenstein that's 3 times bigger, runs on all fours, and has officially lost whatever scraps of human intelligence he had left. So yeah, things just got even worse. Now, looking like something straight out of a prehistoric horror movie, Nemesis loses his remaining eye. His muscle mass explodes, and his bones thicken into dense armor. His hands and feet become massive claws that can tear through solid floors like they're made out of cardboard. Oh, and let's not forget the creepy, spiny ridges running down his back. At this stage, he's basically an unstoppable predator. He senses exactly where you are, giving you barely any time to react. His intelligence is gone, replaced with pure animalistic rage. No more tactical attacks or clever tricks, just savage strength, wild swipes, and terrifying charges. His regeneration is so out of control that even getting hit by multiple fuel tank explosions barely phases him. The more damage he takes, the angrier he gets. At this point, he's basically a rampaging boss battle that refuses to end. Remember when Nemesis's left arm got crushed by an iron door? Most creatures would, suffer from that. Nemesis, on the other hand, just grows a giant tentacle in seconds. Not only does he use it to stab Jill and infect her, but the tentacle gets so thick and powerful that it becomes his primary weapon. Basically, if you weren't terrified of him before, now's a good time to start. How does Nemesis evolve into its third form in the remake? After being dunked in a pool of highly acidic death juice, this abomination of a monster mutates yet again because, of course he does. He starts absorbing every corpse in the room, including zombies and even hunters. Yep, he's literally eating his way to power. At first, Nemesis shows up looking like a massive, disgusting slug cocoon. Then the cocoon splits open, and out comes an even bigger, even nastier abomination that practically fuses itself with the entire room. Now, in his final, hulking form, Nemesis has two enormous, segmented arms that he swings around like wrecking balls. His jaw is still exposed, but now it's bigger, uglier, and packed with even more rows of razor-sharp teeth. One bite from this thing is equal to instant death. He even punches through concrete walls like they're paper. If you were still hoping to make it out alive, I'm afraid it might be too late. What are Nemesis's weaknesses? Even a frightful creature like Nemesis isn't completely invincible. In fact, the very thing that makes Nemesis such a terrifying, unstoppable tyrant, aka his Nemesis Alpha parasite, is also his biggest weakness. Talk about irony. At first, this parasite gives him superior intelligence, insane regeneration, and an unrelenting sense of purpose. The more he mutates, though, the less effective he becomes in combat. At a certain point, Nemesis stops being a strategic bioweapon and starts acting like your average rage-fueled tyrant, which is bad news for everyone, not just the stars. His body mutates so much that he forgets his programming and just destroys everything in sight. While he does become even more resistant to damage, he also loses what's left of his intelligence. At this stage, Nemesis has officially gone from an unstoppable hitman to a giant rampaging murder beast. Unlike most tyrants, whose secondary mutations usually involve beefing up, sprouting giant claws, or getting even more bulletproof, Nemesis mutates differently. That's because the Nemesis Alpha parasite inside him is running the show, and instead of enhancing Nemesis himself, the T-virus is strengthening the parasite. That's why Nemesis starts growing even more tentacles instead of getting more muscles or tougher armor. The parasite is basically taking over, using its regenerative abilities to mutate further, making Nemesis less of a humanoid being and more of a writhing, ever-evolving mass of biological horror. By the time Nemesis hits his final form, he's barely recognizable. He looks like something straight out of a biohazard purgatory. His body is a huge, amorphous blob. His ribs are completely exposed, and his oversized heart is practically sticking out, just daring you to aim for it. If you look closely, you'll notice gross, pulsing blisters all over its body, probably caused by all those lovely corrosive chemicals he took a bath in. These are considered to be his weak points. He's now completely invulnerable to normal weapons and explosives. You could unload every last bullet, grenade, and rocket in your inventory, and Nemesis would just keep coming. At this point, there's only one way to take him down: Umbrella's experimental electromagnetic gun, Finger. He's too big, too strong, and too horrifying for anything but a weapon designed to punch holes through tanks. If you ever needed proof that Umbrella's bioweapons program had absolutely no chill, well, this is it. What are some behind-the-scenes facts about Nemesis? There are some really juicy behind-the-scenes tidbits about Nemesis. First up, did you know that Nemesis's name comes from the Greek goddess of vengeance and retribution? Yeah, that's right. He's literally named after someone who's all about getting even. It's almost poetic. In fact, Nemesis actually translates to enemy. Rather appropriate, isn't it? Also, Nemesis's first form was modeled after the Chatterer from Hellraiser. So in case you didn't expect Nemesis to get any creepier, try envisioning him with that creepy, grinding, teeth-on-teeth look. Oh, and Nemesis's tools are special and designed just for him. Nemesis's ability to use weapons was actually inspired by T-00 from Resident Evil 2. Now let's talk movies. In Resident Evil Apocalypse, the movie version of Nemesis was actually human once. After he got mutated into a giant mutant, they decided to tweak him a bit with some surgery. The tentacles he wields in the games were swapped out for miniguns. There's also a pretty wild backstory in the Tin Hong's manhwa Biohazard 3: Last Escape. Apparently, Nemesis's model series is nicknamed sniper, and before his life as a terrifying bioweapon, he was a professional boxer. Things took a dark turn when he was kidnapped by an Umbrella executive and subjected to some horrifying experiments. He even has flashbacks to the tragic moment when the executive's family was zombified. Nemesis eventually gets his revenge and kills the executive. Oh, and in case you were wondering, Nemesis deliberately lets himself get killed by Jill in his final form because, honestly, when you've been through all that, what's left to live for? That's kind of dark and sad, isn't it? Yeah, it almost made me feel sorry for the dude. Well, allow me to lighten the mood just a bit. Nemesis is boneless. Seriously, the parasite dissolved his skeleton. Was that just funny to me, or was it actually amusing? Oh, and if you're a fan of Easter eggs, here's a weird one. In the Resident Evil 2 remake demo, there's a creepy moment where Nemesis yells "stars" outside of the RPD when usually he just whispers it. In fact, in Umbrella Chronicles, he actually screams it at the top of his lungs, and it sounds like he's really just had enough of all this nonsense. Classic Nemesis. Marvelous verdict. Well, there you have it. You guys have been asking for a video on Nemesis, and we've delivered, and I hope I did it justice. Be it his relentless pursuit of stars, his massive rocket launcher, or his increasingly hideous mutations, Nemesis has certainly earned his place in the Horror Hall of Fame. It's no surprise why he's a fan-favorite villain. Anyway, now let's hear from you. What's your take on this relentless villain? Do you think you could outsmart him? Or would you just give up and start shouting stars with him? Is there any other villain that you want me to cover next? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.